What's up, everybody? We are back, the two of us, reunited, and it feels so good here on the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, the official podcast of Metal Nexus. I am John, and with me again is Dan. How are you doing?
I'm still alive. I know after the last couple of episodes, people are like, is he alive? Is he actually there? I am here. I'm alive. I work. I get sick. I have lots of children, lots of podcasts, lots of time in the bathroom, all kinds of stuff. So, so I'm happy to be spending some of that time with you tonight, John.
It has been quite a while. We've dropped an episode with AJ from Fire from the Gods, which you were a part of. So
Yes.
It didn't really feel like you were gone as long as you and I actually haven't talked, which has been about two and a half weeks as of when we're recording this.
It's been a minute.
I did the trip to New Orleans, which was a lot of fun. I just finished my Praline White Russian, as you saw my wife come in and bring it to me and heard that whole discourse. And, did the Arizona trip, which, I think we've done one since that even, maybe not. But I feel like I've been, globe-trotting and experiencing all things around the world, death, life, celebrations of things, being way too inebriated in different areas. And we're back. The guest this episode is Adam D'Amico of Lorna Shore. This is part one of the two-parter we're doing. This Lorna Shore record, holy shit, is it a motherfucker.
This record is straight fire, dude. And I'm not really even into that style too much, kind of that deathcore, But, there's so much more to it than that, and I think that's really what caught me is a lot of, orchestral arrangement and just epic moments, and it's really kind of a landscape of sound, and you don't really get that in that style too often, and it definitely blew me away, and this was a band, to just get the elephant in the room out, right away. A band that is subject to some controversy as of late, and that's actually, when I heard, that's whenever I found out that they even had a new album coming out, and that they had all this unfortunate stuff go down, and I went into it not really knowing what to expect. And was pretty pleasantly surprised by how good the record is.
Yeah, if you've listened to this podcast, former guest of the show, Josh Schroeder, who lives here in Michigan, owner of Random Awesome Studios, recorded such bands as the new Lorna Shore record, one of Joe's favorite records, even if he doesn't listen to this podcast, Plea for Purging's last record, Color Morale's No Hope, all the King 810 stuff, Battle Cross, he does a lot of the interesting records that bands put out, and just as a phenomenal producer, just has an ear for getting with bands and making the best album that those bands sometimes will make out of their career. And, I think this is their third record for Lorna Shore, and, this stands head and shoulders above anything else they've really done in my eyes. And like you said, I was telling someone today, actually, in discussing, Lorna Shore, because I was listening to the record and someone's like, what is that? It just sounds like just noise coming through a headphone, which I can kind of understand, but I was like, dude, this is this band Lorna Shore, and I like this record because unlike a lot of bands in this genre or albums of this genre, you can actually hear everything. Even when it's really chaotic and I can't remember the song off the top of my head exactly by name, but there's a song where it's a blast beat, all the guitars are doing shit, the orchestral shit's coming, the vocalist dude's just doing everything from pig squeals to gutturals to everything, and it's for 45 seconds just the most chaotic shit you've ever heard. But you can understand and pick out every single thing that's happening. And in this genre, that's not always the case. And I think that's an attestment to Josh and what he's able to do because, and Dan's laughing. You can't see it, maybe you can hear it, but Dan's laughing because he knows I'm fucking right.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I need to grab my composure here. John's just dropping them. But no, you're not wrong, dude. And I'm completely derailed. Sorry. Do we need to do the whole bit again? Do I need to react to it?
No.
All right. Sorry.
It is interesting, though. Dan commented on the fact that there's a lot of controversy surrounding this release. And full transparency, when this interview was presented to us, it was expressed like, yo, you can't talk about certain things. But there are certain aspects of those things that we're not supposed to talk about that I find interesting, because I think it correlates to the bigger picture of, dude, like, this whole thing you've been working at for 10 years can go away and it not be any fault of your own. And it's so recent that you're dealing with this. What were you going through when that happened? And I think it's a way to discuss part of the issue of what's going on with Lorna Shore and why everyone probably knows of the band in name, at least, without having to get into anything specific that legally they can't discuss currently.
Yeah. And that's the unfortunate thing, is like, I'm such a curious person that I just like want to rip that scab open and really dig deep into it. But I think the way they've handled it thus far has been pretty good, considering the circumstances. I know there's been a lot of people calling for, like, re-record the whole record. But, it's like, great, you want to go ahead and send us the money to do that? Or, like...
Well, we touched on some of that in the second chat, which you will hear a couple of days after this one drops. Actually, that's as good of a spot as any to really kind of get into this conversation with Adam D'Amico of Lorna Shore. So let's get into that chat, and we'll talk to you afterwards and prep you for part 2. So I had the pleasure of ending my workday with Adam D'Amico, guitarist of the band Lorna Shore, whose latest album, Immortal, is out now via Century Media Records. Just want to say, what a motherfucker of an album, man. This thing rips.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to hear that. It's awesome to receive this feedback this entire past week. So it's awesome to hear this.
So, interestingly enough, I there's no way I could not bring this up. You recorded it here in Michigan, where I live, with Josh Schroeder, friend of the podcast. How did you find working with Josh, and what led you to Josh, given the pedigree of, the diversity of what he's done?
Well, that's one reason why to him was just the fact that he's very diverse. We've always known him for a while. I think the stars never aligned with us wanting to work on stuff with him, whether it be a record or a single. I think we weren't available and he wasn't available, so it never worked out. So we've been trying. I think internally the band has been trying for a few years now. It was sent by a recommendation. I forget who even sent it to us because it was such a long time ago. Maybe an old manager or something like that mentioned Josh, and I think some of their band worked with him. I forget where it came from. It's just been such a long time coming where we wanted to work with Josh. Yeah, I think the stars finally aligned where we did 2 singles with him, and we loved the experience we had working with him. It's to date I think our best producer environment that we've ever been in. I think he had all of the pro qualities about all the other producers we work with, as well as none of the cons that we experienced with other producers. So for us, it was just a no-brainer to work with him, and I think a huge, massive success of why the record is the way it is because working into the comfort with such an awesome human being allows you to the best version of yourself. So we're super grateful to work with Josh, and I think something that the band has been looking for a while, finding that producer that made sense.
It was kind of funny. He had, when in texting him, trying to get some fun stories out of the recording process to kind of bring up, he had mentioned that you somehow had known about the band he was in, Besieged, which I don't really recall them ever touring much out east. So I think it was kind of interesting that, you were a fan of his as far as, what he brought to the table as a musician in addition to what he does as a producer.
Yeah, it was weird because I think this was back in the MySpace era. And I remember this was, it was just seeing it on other bands from that area, top 8. And their picture was little GIF, if you will. I always when I saw it, and then I listened to they had like a Terminator cover, and I was like, oh my god, this is like super sick. And yeah, and I kind of like was interested in the band. I couldn't tell you like off the top of my head, but I just remember like being like in that era of like finding music on MySpace and being really into like all the like underground artists, you know, especially like smaller underground artists. It was like so easy to find as opposed to like before that, like you couldn't find these like really underground bands that are like in its infancy. You know, that's how I found out about it. It's just crazy. When we were staying at his father-in-law John's house, they were coming up Besieged, and I was like, wait, what is it? Did they record with Josh? And he was like, Don was like, no, he actually was in band. And I was like, holy shit, I had no idea. So it was kind of surreal because like I haven't heard of that band in like forever, and completely forgot about it until that point in time.
It's just kind of always interesting, you know, being able to I feel like that's kind of something that separates Josh from a lot of other people, is that, you know, he has been in the vans, he's done the long weekend tours and so forth and made no money and, you know, carved out his niche by putting in the time and the work. And I feel like that's something that maybe band people, like an intangible that bands that go record with him are able to kind of see. And so when he has ideas to work with you to kind of make a song be better, that maybe it lends you to be more susceptible to what he's offering you because you know he's been in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think every producer we've ever worked with came from the band world, which is very comfortable because they understand what it's like to be in your shoes. So that's always been a thing. I think most producers nowadays come from the band world. Like, to like not be in a band and like all want to record music. I feel that lack of perspective doesn't really serve you. I think, at least I feel comfortable as an artist to know that you know what it's like to be sitting in my shoes and you know be like creative like that. So it definitely I think Josh's big pro to him is not the fact that like he was in a band. I think that like, he's just very open to how things can be. Like I'm so used to like sometimes getting myself like boxed into a corner, and I think that he's just very open to like trying things out and like putting a different spin on them or being open to anything. And is I think his huge pro because of the fact that he works with so many different artists, that he has so many different angles and perspectives to try out, whereas a lot of producers stick to their niche, so they're kind of recording similar type bands. And I feel personally a lot of bands start to sound the same. They're kind of in the same realm to begin with and working with the same producer, so I feel like a lot of your sound is kind of molding together the same way. Whereas since Josh does different bands, I mean, I think he did the band Burials before, then he did Us, and then he did a completely different band after Us. So, that just in a span of 3 months, worked with 3 different types of bands. And I know he's constantly always doing different types of artists that like he had different perspectives to try out. And sometimes when we're caught in like our own shit and like doing the same thing, he might suggest something like, hey, when we try something like this, that maybe he gathered that perspective from like a different or whatnot. So that was for me one of his biggest like pros, was being like open to trying different things out and like not being like attached to how things are supposed to look.
Absolutely. You know, something that was interesting in talking to Josh, because I remember texting him probably on my 3rd or 4th listen, and I was really trying to figure out where the orchestral stuff was coming from. Did you guys bring that to the table? You know, because when I get these records, it's just a link. I don't really get, you know, the liner notes and tells me who all did what. And I was pleasantly surprised to find out that, you know, Josh did a majority of the orchestral arrangements and so forth, with a little bit of help, I think, on the 2 singles from JD from Ice Nine Kills. So kind of wanted to know a little bit more about how that was, you know, working with them to kind of bring this very cinematic quality to the record.
Cool. Yeah, actually, that's a very interesting story, I think, for me, because I've got to know JD because we did a tour with him, and he was like, hey, like, you know, I would be really like interested in like doing some like orchestral stuff for, you know, your band, you know. And I was like, cool, like we've always wanted to like have that in our music, but we never had the time or like a person dedicated towards that. And we're like, okay, well, we're doing these 2 singles at this point in time, like, are you down to do that? And so we already, you know, paid him for it, and we moved studio time around. Then we got in the studio with Josh, and I told Josh, I'm like, listen, we have someone willing to do this. And he's like, okay, cool. And then while we were recording the songs, JD was putting together stuff for like the song This Is Hell. And then because the fact that it was someone just like spending their time dedicated towards that was really like awesome, because they can just go over the top. It's not like we have to like take time in the studio for it and we can like put like minuscule touches on it. Like he had all the time dedicated for just that aspect. And what I basically did is I gave him like because I wrote like basic like MIDI stuff for it, like pretty like basic chord progressions or pretty basic like melody ideas to like outline all the stuff. So he had a lot of like stuff to start with, and then he kind of put his spin on it, because I don't know how to arrange an orchestra, and a lot of it is like how like different instruments come in and come out and like different velocities. Like I can just kind of come up with the melody and the idea, but like how to make it sound like an orchestra is something that I'm not too familiar with. And like how I really realized that is that when we did the single for Darkest Spawn, I actually went up to JD's place and spent the weekend with him, because he was like, it might be easier instead of us like sending emails back and forth. And I sat with him that whole weekend. We worked on Darkest Spawn, and I saw that how he like arranged things. I was sitting over his shoulder being like, hey, let's try this out. Let's try focusing on this melody, or let's add something here. So that was like really awesome. And I think having those two songs had that big orchestra like impact got us really excited. So when we went to the studio with Josh, we were still considering on working on a couple songs with JD, but like he was also really busy because he was working on stuff at the same time. And like we also didn't really have the budget, because the budget just went into the whole album. So we were like, oh shit, like how can we do this? And then Josh was like, well, I would like to give it a try. If you're just willing to just give me MIDI, then like I'm willing to like take a shot at this. And I was like, okay, cool. So I basically did the same thing with Josh, which is like come up with like MIDI ideas and like chord progressions, or like, hey, let's outline this melody or whatnot. And then he like went balls to the wall with it, where he was just like, whenever we were stuck as a band, like not sure what to do, like, and we were just kind of like at a loss, he would just really like go head first into like diving into orchestral stuff. So we were able to work on that stuff in the process of the recording, as opposed to like, whereas every other album this was an afterthought. So this time like the orchestral stuff was like implanted during the process, so we can really focus on it. We can make decisions about it. We can really think about it. It was just useful because the fact that like it would be always at points when we were like stuck. We're like, I don't know what to do with this song. What can we do? And then he would focus on like orchestral stuff on other songs, or, you know, how we started the song Immortal is that like I wrote a chord progression that we really liked. And then he just, when we were stuck, just started kind of adding all these different elements and like making this giant intro, which became the song Immortal. It's just like me giving him simple like melody ideas, and him and us sitting in a room just like being like, hey, let's try this, let's add this, let's duck this out. And then like, that's how that stuff came about. So he had a big hand in it, and it was really awesome to be able to have a full orchestral and like symphony like elements added to it. And it was pretty easy, and it was awesome to just have our hands also involved in it, and like being able to make decisions with that person.
So one of the reasons I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the recording process and a little bit more behind the scenes of the actual music that's on the record. I'm not going to get into what's been happening with you. You've made a post. It's pretty obvious in public of what's been going on. But something I did want to talk about, because so I did an interview with Nick from Night Versus a long time ago, and was talking about when Doug left the band, how the band approached writing the record. Now that they didn't have to think about a vocalist in mind, and something he said was that basically we've never written with a vocalist in mind. Doug basically had to find his own places on those records where he could find, space for himself to go. We never thought of him, which good, bad, or indifferent. And I've never really heard a musician say that has, a singer, where it's like, that's up to them, man. Like, we write the music we write, and you got to find your spot to put your lyrics over. And so in light of all of that was kind of going on with you guys recently, it did make me wonder, with as cinematic as this music feels all on its own, obviously I'm sure that there was, vinyl already being pressed and all these things being done ahead of time, which would maybe prevent this. But was there ever a thought of just putting this out as a standalone instrumental record?
Yeah, I think it's still a thought. We're still toying with the idea of putting it out instrumentally. To be honest, like I can agree with that with the guy from Night Versus, because we do the same thing. Like we write music with like music in mind. Like we know that there's going to be vocals on top of it, but like that's never like our thought process. We're never like, oh man, we're writing this riff for vocals. It's more like, okay, we're writing this riff because this is what me and Austin want to do. And that's how we've written every record. It was, myself coming up with ideas, and me and Austin would solidify these songs, and then we just hand them off to vocalists. And whether that's like the right way or the wrong way, it's just the way that it's always been for the band, is like just centering the music around the music and the vocals to do what vocals do. And it's not like it's an afterthought. It's just like, I'm not a vocalist. I'm a guitar player. I think about guitar. Austin's a drummer. He thinks about drums. So because the fact that me and him are working on this music and are collaborating on these like ideas, it's just, we only think about ourselves because it's just, that's the only perspective I understand. I don't know what it's like to be in a drummer's shoes, which is why I don't focus on drums, because that's a waste of my energy, because I don't know what it's like to be a drummer. I don't play drums. I couldn't tell you how to play drums. So I'm not going to try to like think of ideas. I mean, I have a general understanding of drums, but like, to convey an idea of what I'm thinking, but like, nonetheless, it's the drummer's responsibility to come up with drums, I think. And as far as vocals are concerned, I don't know what it's like to be a vocalist. I don't know what it's like to think of patterns. I don't know what it's like to write lyrics. I don't know what it's like to do any of that stuff. Like, that's never been my responsibility. My responsibility is to be the guitar player and to write music. Like, I lend opinions and I lend ideas to it, but like, nonetheless, I never think about vocals. Like, and especially in our world, like, vocals to me are just, I think, another layer. Like, vocals to me have never been like a forefront, especially when you get into vocals that are really hard and undistinguishable. It's just another layer. It's not really like this thing that you latch onto. It sounds cool and you can be like, you can acknowledge that it sounds cool, but like, it's not like in the pop world where like it's very centered around vocals. Like, maybe the instruments, for a pop song are very like, useful and have a good melody, but like, realistically, we know it's centered around the vocalist and it's centered around like their voice and the vocal melody, which is why pop artists are just solo members. It's just the person, whereas a band is a collective group of people. And I think especially in the metal genre, to me, it feels like vocals are just kind of there. They accent the music. And, I know people get attached to vocals and lyrics and whatnot, but like me as a guitar player, I always focus on music and I always think about music. So definitely I'm a lot more biased, but that's just how I always am. So, and the main thing that, why we thought about putting out instrumentally is because like I can listen to this record instrumentally, and I wanted to be able to write a record that you can listen to it instrumentally. And we have the instrumentals, and I've listened to them, and I'm like, oh wow, this is awesome. Like, this is really cool to like hear the songs instrumentally. And that's something that I'm very proud of, because like I'd never wanted to write music that was simply just carried by one other element. I wanted to also be responsible for myself.
How awesome has it been in light of the things going on that your label, because too often now, and I don't mean to say this, I'm trying to be as broad as possible. So in the very much cancel culture we live in, where you're damned by association, whether you did do something, didn't do something, whatever, everyone has to kind of pay the repercussions and so forth. I think it's been very admirable that your label didn't shut this down, didn't try to, like I said, it could have been 100% in their right to just go, nope, not putting this out, but they didn't. And I think that speaks volumes to how they feel about the music. I think to the work that went into it between everybody that was a part of it, but more so the belief in you guys that came up with the music initially and backing you amongst a lot of the things that you kind of have gone through even before this record came out. How great is it, when you see so many issues of labels just dropping bands for whatever fucking reason, that Century Media has stuck by your side through a lot of the issues you've gone through over the last couple of years?
It is really awesome, because I think they see us for who we really are. And like one thing that really indicated to us like right away was like, we signed the band for the music, not for just the individuals. And clearly the reason why they believe in putting out the album is because they believe in the band musically. And it's awesome to have that support, because like, we know what we did, we know like what we're responsible for, and like, the fact that it would have been unfortunate, and like they would have been in their right to like just be like, we're not putting out this record, we choose. And that was a conversation that they were potentially having. Like when we received the information, this is when the industry is down. The industry is down pretty much before Christmas up until like after New Year's, and like we found this information out like right then and there. I made a decision the day before Christmas Eve, so like the industry was down for the next 2 weeks. And like our management told us there's a potential conversation that they might not want to put out this record. And we're like, okay, like this is unfortunate, but the fact that what they were telling us is that they believe in the band, they believe in the music, that's what they believe in. So it's awesome to have that, like, I think in our corner, because I feel like when we lost our last vocalist, it was just ourselves. We didn't have really much support in our corner. And to have someone in your corner believing in you, like at times when you probably doubt yourself and don't believe in yourself, it kind of brings you back to like your purpose. Because it's, I would be lying to sit there and say that the band's morale didn't like shift and we didn't have like questioning like, well, what are we doing? Like, what's going on with this? But when you have a whole team of people behind you, from management, booking, and a label and European booking and whatnot, believing in you, and like, it's really awesome to have that support, because in times when you are in these dark places of like, what do you do? They really like kind of like build you back up to be like, this is, we believe in you as like the music entity, not just like the individual. So I don't know. It's really awesome to have that support because we never had that support as a band.
So I had asked Joey Gonzalez, who is in Phil Anselmo's band a long time ago, or still is actually, in the Illegals. And, I had interviewed him about a year after the whole Phil thing went down, and I basically was like, it's been interesting to me to think about not what Phil did, but the ramifications of like the blast zone. So basically, you're in 3 different bands with Phil. When this news hit initially, were you like, oh shit, like what's going to happen to my livelihood based on somebody else? Like just the real life ramifications of being associated with somebody. What was that like for you? Because I mean, you guys, as we've kind of discussed, like you have put in a lot of work on this record, and it was, on so many people's like most anticipated a 2020 list and so forth. To have this happen so close to the product coming out, what goes through your mind as that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, believe me, it was a lot of like frustrating experiences because like even before the record came out, it's like I put in 10 plus years into this band of like putting in a lot of effort and a lot of work, and it was like it's just going to like crash all of the work that I put into. It's just going to like just tarnish all like the struggles and all the efforts and all the tours that we've taken and all the things that we've done. It's just going to just come like crashing down when like prior to that we just released a single Immortal. We just released the video for Immortal. And I was seeing so much positive feedback. I was getting interviews, and everyone was just like, I cannot wait for the record to come out. Like, it's phenomenal. I'm like, oh my God, like finally, like our like, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like all this effort we put into is like finally worth it. Like we're finally going to be able to, as a band, like not have to keep overcoming these like hurdles that we constantly overcome. And to kind of then have that situation happen where then it's like, oh my God, like potentially everything can go away. All my effort can go away based off of nothing that I even did, based off of nothing that like I had a clue of, based off of nothing that I was aware of. And stuff that like I don't even think about. And I'm like, fuck, like this could all go away based off of not even me. Not even like I've just put out a bad record. Not even like I did something, like on my part where, chose not to tour and whatnot and like been responsible for. Like this could potentially like harm me in a sense where this is not going to, like it's going to ruin everything I've created. So we had those thoughts, and I was very frustrated. I would call Austin being like, dude, we like put in like so many years, because Austin's been there since pretty much the beginning as well. Like he's been in this band for about almost 8 years now. So like he's put in tons of work, and it was quite frustrating to have that, to have that thought and to like think about that. But we realized that none of that served us. We realized that like thinking that would not make the situation any better. Like you could be blaming someone, you could be like, well, this is all your fault and whatnot, but I don't know, it didn't feel good thinking in that sort of way. So we approached it in the sense of like, okay, like there's no sense in thinking that, and like to keep that in a headspace is not going to make the situation any better. So we were just like thinking about, okay, let's just focus on the positives in the situation as opposed to like the negatives and whatnot, because right now thinking about the negatives is only going to make matters worse.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you have another interview, I think, after me. So where can people find you online, and what does, I guess, the rest of this year have for you?
Well, they can find us online at on Instagram, on Facebook, on Spotify, on YouTube. Just search Lorna Shore. With that, you can also find all the individual members like myself. We're on all social media platforms. And yeah, all we really ask is just people to just listen to the record and, take it for what it is and enjoy all of the hard work that we put into it, because I think you can sense it while listening to this record. So
awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, and looking forward to hopefully catching a show soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So that was my conversation with Adam D'Amico of Lorna Shore. This felt a little rushed when we initially did this. I was at work. Full transparency, I totally thought I had the meeting room at my job open and to do this, and in the last like 4.5 minutes, someone walked in and was literally sitting across from me as I was listening to Adam kind of tell the last part of his reply to a question I asked. And that's why I was like, well, I got you for a couple minutes and you got another interview, and trying to wrap it up real fast because like I had someone else in the room with me, and it was awkward as shit because I could tell like a meeting was about to happen any fucking minute at my job, and I needed to get off this thing and get the fuck out of there. And I also knew that Adam had another interview coming right behind me, so I ended up texting him when we were done. I was like, hey, hopefully some of the questions I asked about, your vocalist issues and so forth that you've been going through weren't, too prying, weren't too bad. It really is a fine line to do some of these interviews sometimes where you're given parameters like, don't talk about this, you can talk about this, and I know that I probably straddled the line as best as I could, but I also didn't want people to listen to this and be like, you totally fucking pussed out and didn't ask anything about the circumstances that they were going through revolving this record. And I think I did, where I was like, have you thought about putting this out as an instrumental? Like, I know the record as it stands now already was done and pressed and all that, but like, have you thought about putting it out as an instrumental?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty bold, honestly, because, you know, trust me, I'm no stranger to people giving me crap about not digging deep enough on certain things, but I think that was probably not the question that you know, when we were told, like, hey, you know, you really shouldn't bring this up or whatever. You brought it up without bringing it up.
I tried my best.
Yeah, it can be a little that can be a little rough. I tend to wimp out in situations like that sometimes, and I'm just like, yeah.
I don't know. Go back to that Scott Mellinger episode.
That was different, though. I don't get nervous whenever I talk to Scott. I mean, I get sweaty in my palms, but that's for a totally different reason.
You asked him about Mom's Spaghetti, and he came through.
Absolutely. You can tell we haven't done this in a while. The professionalism's just out of the window.
Well, you know. Yeah, no, it is really hard sometimes to find the line, though, of doing these chats. You know, I know I just made a joke of, you know, you talking to Scott and asking the whole thing about Tim from Esley dying. And despite maybe what some people may think when we do these interviews, whether we, you know, ask the hard-hitting questions, whether we back off, you know, we try to read the guests that we have on. And as you definitely heard, Adam and Austin, from the sounds of it. I mean, I haven't talked to Austin yet, but I kind of would like to. I mean, given the fact that, you know, he is the other half of, you know, this band, basically. It sounds like Adam isn't the kind of person that hides behind faux narratives or whatever. He will tell you how he feels about things, and I really respect that about him. And it's something, you know, a lot of people who listen to this podcast, when they comment on this podcast, say that something about Dan and I that we bring out in people is that, you know, we somehow put people into this very quick sense of security where they are able to talk to us about things. And when we ask questions that may be a little bit harder to answer, they're willing to actually answer them. And I know some of the stuff that Adam said, full transparency, I assume someone on some website, because, you know, we end up on a lot of different things. I assume someone's going to run something. It just probably will happen. But it is one of those things where I don't disagree with anything Adam said. You know, that's, like I said, when we talked to Joey Gonzalez from Phil Anselmo and the Illegals, and I was like, dude, like, you're tied to Phil in 3 fucking bands. Were you worried about your career going away because of something you didn't even do?
Yeah.
And you know, he gave one of the most honest answers out of all of that anyone had heard. I think the same thing just happened when we talked to Adam here, where I go, were you afraid of this going away? And he's like, dude, I put 10 years into this fucking band. It's my heart, my soul, my blood, my sweat, my tears, all the tours, everything that we have done to get where we are could go away because of something I didn't fucking do and I didn't even know anything about. And the reality of that is fucking scary.
It is, and it's funny, the Joey Gonzalez one, too. I still, looking back, I love his answer where he's like, I was just concerned about my friend.
Absolutely.
Like, oh my goodness. And, like, that just, you know, that's how you know when a band is run like a family and when a band is run like a corporation, you know, because I always joke that I never want to be in management because I never want to get fired because it's something somebody else did. You know?
That is a very true story.
Said everybody in Esley dying at one point. Yeah. Although, you know, I guess there's a happy ending to that story. They all got their jobs back.
Woof. Well, I don't really know where to go from there.
See, I can derail you too.
Yep, no, absolutely. So, I mean, with Dan's comment right there, let's wrap up this episode because we have another part coming later on in the week. If you would like to keep up with Lorna Shore, it's simple. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Lorna Shore. All one word, same everything across the board, super simple. If you would like to keep up with Adam, you can find him on Instagram at Adam Demicco. That's Adam, Demicco. Find him there. Check out his shit. We little teaser about what we talk about on the next episode. We talk more about the recording process, about how he had kidney stones throughout the whole thing, which was a fucking wild story. We talk a little bit more about maybe them pursuing being an instrumental band from this point forward. Talks of, just the pros and cons, basically, of having different vocalists throughout the tenure of them being a band. And, we just kind of get into some interesting shit, vinyl collecting, which I know Dan will love talking about. And, so I just really want to take the moment to thank Adam for taking the time to do this episode and being so forthcoming and honest about a lot of the answers, because we kind of asked him some hard shit. And then you're going to hear a little bit more open and honest answers with no time limit really on us. And that's about an hour-long conversation. So I'm really looking forward to doing the second part. And, we did the same thing with Tom Smith. And I've been really appreciative of the people who, we've been forming these friendships and bonds with, who are willing to come on and do a one part and then follow it up. And I think we're in a very unique position, because when we did this interview, the record had been out for a day or two. And then by the time we do the next chat with Adam, he'll basically have had the first week's numbers. And so it's been really cool to kind of get this different story of, I hope it does well, versus the reaction and how it actually did in real time, basically. So again, just want to thank Adam. Really want to thank Selena for setting us up with this interview, and for being so cool when I was like, yo, Adam and I really hit it off, and we're going to do a part 2. Hope you're okay with that. She's been super solid. I actually want to get her on this podcast, because she was supposed to be on last year for Sonic Temple, which we're going to do a whole Sonic Temple episode and some other festivals and so forth. So we already plugged Lorna Shore. We already plugged Adam. If you would like to keep up with Metal Nexus, go over to metalnexus.net, Metal Nexus on Facebook, Instagram at metal.nexus, and Twitter at metal_nexus, and to keep up with everything going on over there. And Dan will tell you where he can be found.
You can find me on Facebook under Daniel Terry, depending on who you are. I have had to block some people recently. And you can find me on Twitter at DiscussMetalDan. You can find me on Gmail at DiscussMetalDan@gmail.com. And you can always reach out to us on the Brewtally Speaking podcast email, brewspeakpod@gmail.com.
And piggybacking off of that, if you would like to keep up with all things this podcast, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at BrewSpeakPod. Email us at BrewtallySpeaking@gmail, like Dan said. We actually got a notification, thanks to the YouTube channel, of someone named Saxel Rose, who is a musician. He's a saxophonist, basically, for Chris Brown, Paramore, Neck Deep, and Issues. So shout out to Saxel for the conversations we've been sharing through DMs and so forth, and for the support and love of the episode of the Matt Fozzy episode, and David Lopez, who has been championing our show like crazy lately. Looking forward to doing more episodes with the Misery Signals dudes.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get in on some of that at some point.
Yeah, for sure. We have, potentially 5 more episodes to do, since Jesse wants to come back and do another 5-parter, or five bands that he wants to do. But, I keep saying that I think this is the year that we get to do a lot of really cool shit, and I 100% wholly think that in my heart that we are on the precipice of doing really cool shit this year. And that Misery Signals episode, Dan and I did a whole discography discussion episode, as I said in the Jesse episode, on our love of Misery Signals and how much we are excited to see where Jesse picks up from where he left off. Because it's, other than Killswitch, what other band have you seen where the original vocalist left, someone took it and ran and picked up and took it to where it, became this huge thing, and then the original vocalist comes back, and you're just waiting to see what that is like, to see if it's like the first record where you were introduced to it or whatever. But man, the fact that Jesse reached out to us to do this thing with him and the rest of the Misery Signals guys, we don't take that lightly. So, like I said, we have a lot of cool shit coming up. And I'm so thankful for everyone who listens to the show. And I promise you, 2020 is going to be the year of some really awesome shit for this show. So thanks for the support. If you would like to keep up with our show sponsors, head over to the Bean Bastard Coffee. Get you some delicious coffee, beanbastard.com. Head over to Facebook and Instagram at the Bean Bastard. Check out On Point Pomade. Use our code BSP15. Get you some hair pomade. Get you some beard oils. Keep your shit looking as good as it possibly can. We sent out some products to our contest winners, and I'm going to tease When you probably follow our socials in the next couple of days, you're going to see some cool shit popping up from one of the guests that we are talking to tomorrow as of when we're recording. And very much looking forward to that, and very much keeps the whole trend of what I was saying of just cool shit continually happening. So can't do it without you guys. Please rate, please review, subscribe, all of those things. Dan beats it to death on discography discussion, but what's more important is the shares, and that really does help. So keep doing that. We want to grow this show as much as we possibly can. If you would like to buy a pin and support us, email us, send us a DM. $15 gets it sent to you anywhere in the U.S. If you live outside of that, we'll figure something out. Head to our Teespring. We got shirts. We got our logo on anything you can possibly think of to buy. It's all quality so far, as much as I can tell from everything I bought personally. And for the Brewtally Speaking Podcast, I am John.
And I am Dan.
We'll talk to you all in a couple of days.